Fine, good evening everyone. This is Patricia and I am traveling for history. I'm in Burlington, Vermont this evening and I'm on Pine Street. Pine Street, why Pine Street? Well, beginning in 1856 when Lawrence Barnes opened his lumber yard, this has been an industrial area of Burlington. Now the lumber industry lasted until the 1920s, and although there are still some lumber companies, their heyday is way behind them. But this building in front of us, this is a little different. This certainly was a company started here in Burlington. So this is the Maltex Building in front of us. The whole thing, all the way to the right. It was anyway, all of Maltex Building. I have a lot to say about this, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it. I'll put a link in the description below, so you can read this yourself if you so desire. Also, I'll be talking about a William J. Van Patten. I spoke about him already in a Battery Park video. I put a link to that as well. And if there's anything else that I talk about that I've already covered in a video, I will link to all of those videos underneath this one in the description below. So this is the Maltex Company. It's 431 Pine Street in Burlington, Vermont. Quote, "The Maltex Building is a distinguished brick edifice on Pine Street in Burlington, constructed in 1900 to house the Malted Cereal Company." If you hear music, by the way, in the background, that's a local beer tasting place. I have no control over the music. The Malted Cereal Company was a creation of a notable Burlington citizen, William J. Van Patten, in the year of 1899. It was funded largely by the Wells Richardson Company, a lucrative wholesale drug company in Burlington, where Van Patten started out as a druggist. A few years before, Van Patten met a chemist, Dr. William Boynton, who had recently developed a process to malt wheat to make a breakfast cereal. Intrigued by the notion of malted cereal for breakfast, Van Patten collaborated with the chemist to initiate the business. This is a very busy north-south street, as you can hear from you see from the traffic. The company constructed this factory here. The first and third floors of the building, on the southern side of the building, that would be over on this side, was for milling, and the basement floor for malting. To the western side of the building, that's the back end, on the back side of the building, and I already have a video up on Fred Barrett, whose statue is back there, so I'll link to that in here too. You can see all about him. All about that statue anyway, in the boiler room, former boiler room. An L for the oven where the wheat was toasted was just to the south of the boiler room. Finally, a railroad stop was built in front of the building to ease the delivery of wheat and the shipment of cereal eventually to across the country. And that is the railroad track right there. It's certainly not a live track anymore, but it does stretch the entire front of the building. The Malted Cereal Company took off almost instantaneously, no doubt in part due to the president's fame. Van Patten, who lived in Burlington, was a politician and businessman known for being a generous and compassionate benefactor in the city. Notably, he was the mayor of Burlington in the 1880s and state senator in 1907, in addition to holding various presidencies of companies and social organizations in the city. Further enhancing the company's rapid growth, the company had an adept modern advertising strategy that centered around the image of a little girl wearing a bonnet eating a bowl of cereal. She became the face of the company. As well, they placed ads in newspapers across Vermont and New England emphasizing the quality of the food, and I quote, "It's a food, not a fad," unquote, and even offered special deals. For example, one ad campaign the company ran in 1903 offered a free carbon picture of the little Dutch girl if consumers merely clipped the coupon and mailed it back to the company. The company also had one more key component to its early success: the treatment of its workers. Reportedly, the company treated its employees very well. Employees had the opportunity to enjoy low-cost hot lunches, and there is at least one instance of when workers were treated to a cruise trip and party afterwards, complete with food and a bonfire, courtesy of Van Patten. The era of Van Patten's presidency of the Malted Cereal Company ended on some sad notes, however. Charles Van Patten, the son of Van Patten, who by then was manager and treasurer of the entire company, committed suicide at age 39 in the basement of the factory one weekday morning in April of 1917. His death devastated Van Patten and company employees. Van Patten himself died unexpectedly a few years later in February of 1920, and the entire city of Burlington mourned. Van Patten's family sold their shares in the company a month later to F.H. Richardson and his son F.W. Richardson of Richmond, Vermont. When sold, the factory was capable of producing up to 300 cases per day of cereal, in addition to beginning to produce Maltex flour, and had a capital of $250,000. Quote-unquote, "taste good is good" was one of the many slogans used by the Maltex Company under the Richardson father-son duo. The Malted Cereal Company aimed to become a modern yet familial company. The factory on Pine Street in the 1930s was reportedly the only cereal factory in New England. Due to research conclusions that the name of the company should be shortened for advertising purposes, the Malted Cereal Company changed the name of its cereal to Maltex Cereal, and the company followed suit. And by 1935, the factory and its operations were described in some depth by F.W. Richardson in 1931. Quoted here, "The factory on Pine Street is heavily constructed and speaks well for the workmanship of its builders. The inside walls and ceilings are painted in white enamel. Machinery is modern, and some of it is almost human in its operation." Unquote. In the 1930s, they started another ambitious advertising campaign involving 28 newspapers and a radio program on the eastern seaboard. With advertising success, in 1934, as the business continued to grow, the company added a 3-story addition to the building designed by Frank Lyman. The earlier commitment to its workers continued, with F.W. Richardson at the height of World War II initiating an employee profit-sharing program where employees were paid a certain percentage of company profits. In 1950, the company invented Maypo, a hot oats cereal with maple flavoring, just before Richardson sold the company to a Connecticut food and beverage company, Hublin. Under the leadership of the Hublin Company, the factory expanded the company's offerings in cereal quite a bit. Maypo became a huge hit, and it was heavily advertised. In 1956, following in the tradition of innovative ad campaigns, Maltex developed a particularly distinct character that hit television screens: Marky Maypo, a tiny child who begged persistently, arguably annoyingly, for his Maypo cereal. The company also rolled out other variations of the cereal, such as an instant Maypo and Maple, spelled capital M-A-Y-P-L, a hot oat cereal with maple flavoring over the next 16 years. By 1958, the company employed 51 people and made the cereal at the factory in a series of steps. First, the wheat was shipped from the Midwest and run through steel rollers. Next, the kernels were toasted and the barley was exposed to heat and water until the seeds sprouted. Finally, the two ingredients were mixed, pre-cooked, sterilized, and then packaged. Also in 1959, the company built a long, L-shaped addition that was raised up on steel beams to the building's northern elevation, which was used for storage, and that's this side of the building over here. Now it's a little dark. Perhaps not when you watch it, but when I'm looking at it, it's a little dark. The company made an effort to be part of the community as well as being a national producer of cereal, and yearly students and visitors were welcome to tour the facility. The Standard Milling Company bought the factory in the early 1960s. It was another national company. For the next several years, they continued to produce Maypo and Maltex cereals at the factory for a national audience. On May 9, 1969, the vice president of the whole company came in from Missouri and gathered the 26 employees of the factory around him and abruptly told them the factory was closing that very day. The company's executives cited economic reasons and stated they were moving production of the cereal to their factories in Pennsylvania. After 70 years, after 70 years, the Maltex Company closed its doors and stopped its operations quickly and swiftly forever. Maypo can, however, still be found in grocery stores today. A few years later, in 1973, Green Mountain Industries purchased the building and operated a woodworking company until 1981. Rick Davis said in 1983, "We are hatching businesses here," referring to his recent purchase and plans for the Maltex Building. He bought an empty Maltex Building from the Vermont Development Credit Union with an intent to innovate and repurpose the building as an incubator for small businesses. He acquired a large Urban Development Action Grant, along with a large bond, to conduct renovations. The renovations consisted of gutting the building, cleaning the pine floors, partitioning rental spaces, and updating facilities. In 1985, he had the boiler room's roof removed and the exterior brick walls remained to form a space in the back of the building. The L-shaped addition underwent a renovation by Truex Cullens, a local architecture company, where metal and wood panels were put up to replace old exterior pink walls. Again, that's this side of the business right over here. And the interior was renovated into 5 office spaces. Now, at the time of this writing of this item, this is what I'm reading from, which is 2014, it says, "Today, the Maltex Building is still owned by Rick Davis and the Maltex Partnership and houses a variety of businesses inside. Outside, the railroad tracks still remain as a reminder of the building's earlier history." Unquote. I remember when my mother and I moved here in 1977 that Pine Street just looked like a sad, gloomy shell of its former self. That was through the end of the 70s into the early 80s, and I'm glad to see, I was super glad to see the rebirth of this area. And that's thanks in part to the Maltex Building having a new lease on life. Well, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll have links in the description below for a variety of videos you may have missed. And until again, you have a great evening, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye.